Man editorial.
Gingerman editorial.
Yep.
Hello and welcome to the second episode ever of Daily American Press's Chatting with Abby. I'm here with Ginger from Twitter. Ginger, would you like to introduce yourself super quick?
Yeah, hi. I go by Ginger here on the interwebs. You can find me at Gingerman Editorial on Twitter. And I don't know, I do a lot of different things. Sometimes I edit things, sometimes I write things, and other times I'm on my own podcast, Fighting the Void, which will be getting back to regularly scheduled programming here in the very near future. I've been intermittent / absent basically since April for a variety of extremely good reasons that I won't go into here.
We believe you in your good reasons.
They are fantastic, I assure you.
I I believe it. I have launched so many things and then dropped off for very good reasons. George over at Daily American Press thought it would be pretty cool with the day we post this will be Constitution Day. So he thought it would be cool to do a bit of a debate about whether or not the Constitution is dead for all intents and purposes. And if it is dead, why would we be celebrating Constitution Day? So we figured Ginger and I have a very similar set of viewpoints on the world, but Ginger's going to take the more depressing view that it's dead, and I'm going to take the slightly more optimistic view that it's still alive. It's taken some hits. So if you'd like to kick us off, Ginger, with your first argument.
Okay. The Constitution, I think, is effectively dead as a doornail. You ask why, if it's dead, why would he celebrate Constitution Day? To that, I respond, how many people know that there's a Constitution Day?
Oof. That's a good question. I don't know what people do.
And even amongst those who do, who celebrates it, if I'm being completely honest, this is the closest I've come to celebrating Constitution Day ever in my life, is having a discussion about it. So right off the bat, I think that's a pretty good indicator that at the very least, at best, it's on life support. To that end, also, it's not, the real question isn't about whether or not the Constitution is dead, wounded, alive and kicking. That's not the real question. The question is, does anyone care about it? That's the real question. And it seems abundantly clear to me that at least amongst the halls of power in this country, almost no one does. Almost no one cares. And I'd hazard most of the people in power probably haven't read it.
That's true.
I would not be shocked at all if the vast majority of Congress has not so much as read it. They might have a vague notion of the Bill of Rights, and that's it. And I mean a vague notion.
Wow. Well,
so there you go.
Well, I do agree that I think a lot of people are completely constitutionally illiterate, and that no one really cares about Constitution Day, even people on the right. Which, if you're listening and you don't know, that was the day that the Constitution was adopted back by the Founding Fathers. It what, 17... I want to say 70... Ooh. It wasn't 1776. It was a couple years after.
No, it was definitely after that. I think I want to say it was in this it was late. It was later than you think, actually. Mm-hmm. And I can never remember the date because you get caught up in all of the other dates.
Yes, but for sure.
Let me look it up real quick, because when I do that, I'm always surprised. Like, oh my gosh, it's so much later than I thought it was. 1787.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little bit. We limped along on the Articles of Confederation for quite a while before we even did the Constitution.
And just for a little bit more historical background, during those years, the Founding Fathers disagreed as to whether to adopt the Constitution or whether to continue with the Articles of Federation. And then one of the big arguments was, did we want a federal government, or did we want to continue having states being pretty much the primary, kind of an allied group of states? And that was the source of documents like the Federalist Papers, which were arguing for federalism and for the Constitution, and then the Anti-Federalist Papers, which would have been arguing against. And the Bill of Rights itself was a concession to the Anti-Federalists to protect some of the rights they were most concerned about.
Yes, which turned out to be one of the best things that the Federalists did. And especially, and I wish I had done this more recently, but a couple of years ago, I listened to the Anti-Federalist Papers. I listened to both, and I was shocked by how right the Anti-Federalists have been proven to be in recent years. In fairness to the Federalists, I think it took a lot longer than the Anti-Federalists would have thought for them to be proven right. So in all fairness, but I was also surprised by how little a lot of the Anti-Federalists were asking. Like a lot of it was just like, but why not put these two words in?
Right.
It's like, and I was just, I wish I had done this more recently so I could be more specific, but it was just shocking to me. It's like, why wouldn't you go ahead and do this? You know, we're so often, and apparently the founders were just as prone to this. We're so prone to be lazy, and like, well, clearly that will never happen,
right?
Because
people would never be that dumb.
No one would ever think like that. Right. Well,
we do.
Yeah, we do, and we think things that there's no way the founders could possibly have imagined, and we've gone so far down the slippery slope. We're not sliding down the slope. We haven't hit bottom. We hit bottom about 10 years ago, and then we got an excavator and we dug deeper so we could just keep sliding and sliding and sliding.
You're not wrong. I will say one thing I found interesting about their debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists was one of the concerns about adding a Bill of Rights was, if we write in what rights you have, that implies that you don't have anything that we didn't remember to put in, which is one of the reasons now we're struggling with parental rights, because it was never written in. They didn't think that they'd ever have to say it. So sometimes I wonder,
that's exactly where the 10th Amendment comes in. You know, if the Constitution doesn't say anything about it, then it's for the states to figure out.
Right.
And unfortunately, now you're exactly right that we assume if the Constitution doesn't say anything about it, then it doesn't exist at all. And if the Constitution does say something about it, well, then the application is typically narrow. Actually, in all honesty, this is one of the things I've learned doing recent looking into American history. There have been arguments over exactly what various parts of the Constitution meant since the ink was dry.
Absolutely.
You know, especially things like nullification and whatnot. Just how far the states' rights really go. Dues. Listen to me. Dues. Yes. Sorry. It's the crack. Anyway, it gets to you. It makes words hard. And there's been discussion over like how much the Bill of Rights really applies. Does it apply only at the federal level? Does it apply all the way down? Those arguments have been going on literally since the ink was dry.
Yes. Yeah, I think that there have been mistakes of interpretation since within 50 years of ratification. So,
very much so.
Yeah, to the argument that I'm super procrastinating having with you as to whether or not it's dead, I would say the things that we think of when we think of, is the Constitution dead? The First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the things that are being attacked are not the entirety of the Constitution. So I would argue that while there are a couple places in the Constitution that are really under attack, that are very, very concerning levels of attack, that there's so much of the Constitution that we just never think about because nobody questions it.
Right.
Most of the structure of our nation is determined by the Constitution, and people don't really question, should we elect senators? Should POTUS be the commander-in-chief? Some of those things that the right and left completely agree on.
Right. Yeah, people don't realize that back in the day, the senators were not elected by the people. They were appointed by state legislators. And now, in all fairness, that's not something that was just changed willy-nilly. There was a constitutional amendment that made that possible. So as far as that goes, well, okay, they changed it. I don't necessarily think it was the best idea, but they changed it using the proper process.
Right.
And as far as that goes, I don't really have a problem with it, because using the constitutional process to change the Constitution does not undermine the Constitution.
Correct.
As Dennis Miller once very wisely said, the amendment process is proof that the founders knew what all wise men know, that they don't know everything. And they included a system to change it because they knew circumstances in the nation would change as years go by. They might have left something out. There might be something that needs to be changed that's existing in it. And they trusted to the wisdom of the people to be able to make those changes, which again is why there's an amendment process. Now, to keep it from being to just being completely on a whim, and in fact then actually undermining the Constitution, they also made it hard because they were smart. They were smarter than we are.
They were very, very smart. I am in awe of the document. I think that people who haven't actually read it or know the history on the right tend to talk about it like it's the actual Bible or some sort of religious text. And it was written by fallible human beings. So I do think that there's room to say they failed us in this regard because they couldn't see far enough down the line.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, is the Constitution dead, I don't want to veer, and I don't think you will, but I wouldn't want to veer into territory of, is our religion dead? Because that would be silly.
That would be silly, yes.
I do think it's in a very desperate spot, especially when you have the current administration kind of outright saying, we know that this is illegal. We know this is unconstitutional. We don't care. We're doing it anyway.
Yep.
My one kind of spot of hope is that things move very slowly. We have an expectation with the speed of our culture that things happen quickly, and when they don't, we kind of lose hope very quickly. But court cases, Supreme Court cases, challenges to unconstitutional things, those things take a significant amount of time. And so I think it might be a little early to give up on anything that's happened kind of in the last even 2 years.
I'm going to go ahead and completely dash that little bit of hope.
No!
Yep.
Okay. Do it.
I'm sorry, but I have to. One of the books every American should read is Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. If were I dictator, I would make everybody read this book.
Okay.
And one of the things that stuck with me when I read this massive tome is de Tocqueville detected a weakness in our system. And that very weakness was the judiciary.
Yes.
He saw in it the possibility that they could accrue a vast amount of power to themselves and essentially wind up being legislators from the bench.
Yes.
He didn't use that terminology, but that's what he was getting at.
Yeah.
And of course, he was like, but that would never happen because, the judiciary, the people that are appointed, are so by disposition prone to defer to the legislature that they would never undermine said legislature. They would never undermine the very system they were put in there to uphold. Well, that was before Dred Scott.
Yes.
That was before Roe v. Wade, when we literally, Dred Scott, if I were to read it, I'm willing to bet you could actually make an argument, a wrong argument, but you could make an argument that would defend the decision based on constitutional grounds. And I doubt they invented any new rights or anything to make Dred Scott happen. If anything, they were ignoring rights, and they were ignoring the clear intent of the founders of the country to undermine and eventually do away with slavery. However, Roe, as we all know on the right, they literally invented rights out of thin air. They were like, well, it's in the number of the Constitution. Like, the what now? That's not how documents work.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, there is that thing where, just because a right isn't in the Constitution doesn't mean it should be protected, right? So It is fair to say that, yes, we do have a basic right to privacy. Now, abortion isn't about that, though. It's not about privacy. It's literally life and death. So then right there was perhaps the single biggest thing where the Constitution just took a massive hit. It was just like, okay, we can literally just invent rights now.
Right.
And we will twist things however we want. Even the notorious RBG admitted that legally it was a bad decision.
Right.
Whether obviously she agreed with the results of the decision, but she knew legally it didn't have a leg to stand on. And now bring us up to more recent times. Again, focusing on the judiciary. Under Trump, he couldn't pass a single law without some random judge in some far-flung state. As long as it was a federal judge, he's like, well, I don't think that's constitutional. Injunction. And it suddenly applies to the whole flipping country?
Yeah, that's crazy.
No. That's not how that system is supposed to work at all. But now Biden, he can say whatever the hell he wants.
Right.
And you don't hear anything from the judiciary. Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
And just another example of the judiciary basically, lighting a match under the Constitution there was an I forget the name of the case, but it was eminent domain related. This was, it was probably 10, 15 years ago. But it went from just, okay, we really need this road, we really need to build this dam, whatever, something like that, which frankly, I still disagree with. I think that's one of the flaws in the Constitution. I don't think eminent domain should be a thing, period, because either it's my property or it's the government's property. Pick one. Yeah. But they expanded eminent domain to include things that were like for the general common good. They included to be like, well, if we can build this hotel on your land, that will bring in more tax revenue for the city, and that will be just great for everybody.
Right.
So, yeah, that was another clear example. I'm trying to remember how far back that was. I want to say that was back during Junior Bush's administration. I want to say it's that far back.
Yeah, that would be before I was old enough to think about these things.
Yeah, I'm old.
I wasn't saying that.
No, it's okay. You can say that. It's fine. The beard's growing back out, so you can see the evidence a little bit more.
Yeah. I think that, okay, would you say FDR did some pretty horrible things as far as just going beyond his enumerated powers and
Japanese concentration
yeah,
camps, gold
exactly.
confiscation. Yeah, little things.
Massive violations of American rights and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And we as a country came back from it. So what would you say is different about now?
What is different about now? FDR, misguided though he was at least he was trying to defend and protect the country. He was in a crisis situation with this little thing called World War II going on. So he wasn't trying to. I don't believe he was trying to undermine anything necessarily. I think he did. I think he probably knew he was being unconstitutional. His actions were unconstitutional. I think he was just hoping no one was going to call him on it. But he was kind of like Lincoln during the Civil War. He was like, well, I kind of need to ignore some of these things right now. But we'll get right back to it as soon as the crisis is over. And I think he actually meant it.
Yeah.
As evidenced by the fact that once the war was over, we did away with the concentration camps. And they even paid some sort of reparations to the people that were in there. And which does not justify reparations for slavery, boys and girls, just so you know. Doing reparations for something that happened last week is a lot different than reparations for something that happened 100 years ago.
Right.
Just, distinctions matter.
If you take property from a person, you need to give it back to that person.
Exactly. Maybe a little something extra for their trouble. Now, yeah, I don't think he was trying to undermine anything. And I think he fully intended to get back to normality as soon as it was able to do so. Still within obviously a very liberal interpretation of the Constitution, but within an actual interpretation. Today, they don't care. And again, today, there are so many people in government that are constitutionally illiterate, even the people who pretend to care about it, that I don't think they would know how to get back to normal. And at this point, both parties are so addicted to the way we've been doing things. I mean, executive orders have been rising exponentially, president to president, since Reagan.
That's very true.
That's not something that Trump reversed. And I almost don't blame him. First, because the first gajillion of them were undoing Obama executive orders.
Right.
And when you have and I do understand the desire to try to get something done when you have a Congress that is just not even trying to pretend to work with you.
Right.
And that's one of the things too. We're not, the two parties, at least publicly, refuse to do anything together. Now, we all know that behind the scenes, it's essentially a uniparty. Right. They're not, there's very few members in either party that are really working at different goals.
Yeah.
Not everybody is. There are very few Rand Pauls and Thomas Masseys out there. Put it that way.
That's true.
And even Rand Paul annoys the hell out of me sometimes.
Honestly, I think it takes a certain type of narcissism to even want that position of power.
It does. It absolutely does. But that'll get us wandering far afield.
Very true. Very true.
So suffice to say, I don't think there's the interest now to even go back to trying to pay attention to the Constitution. Yeah, we'll get lip service every now and then, and Republicans know that they have to fight on the first two amendments to some degree.
Right.
Otherwise, they will completely lose their base.
Right.
So they have to at least give rhetoric. They have to at least oppose the Democrats when they try to pass bills that limit things. They know that.
Yes.
Do they really care? No, because if they really cared, when they have, when they actually have control of the two houses of Congress, they would be actually trying to roll back Democrat legislation that does attack those things, that still manages to get passed. But they never do that.
Yeah.
They
I'm
never
mystified by that.
I'm not. Because so long as they're on the defensive, they can scream about how everything's getting attacked, and they raise money off of that.
So as long as, well, okay, so for example, you can't run on the abortion platform anymore if you've outlawed it. If you've already done all the outlawing of abortion, you can't keep doing that.
Exactly. That's exactly why National Right to Life isn't supporting the Mississippi abortion law that severely limits when you can get an abortion. That's why they're not supporting it, because if it winds up upending Roe, how do they raise money anymore?
They're out of a job. Yeah.
Big baby is every bit as much a thing as big pharma.
That's true. I would make the same argument about the NRA.
Yes, the NRA used to be awesome, but I've only been in kind of gun culture for the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years or so.
Right.
In that very short amount of time, I have learned that the hardcore gun people have been kind of unhappy with the NRA for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And that sentiment is not changing. Plenty of them would counsel you to not get an NRA membership.
Yeah, I would certainly do that.
Yeah. I was thinking about it for a little while there, and then I'm like, yeah, it doesn't seem like a good idea, as it turns out.
To that end, though, I would argue that even if the Constitution has no path to healing, as I could get on board with what you're saying as far as with how things are looking now, even if it's not dead yet, it's on its way out. However, I would say it's not dead until the Second Amendment is gone. And the Second Amendment doesn't get gone until there's a certain amount of bloodshed. So I don't think we have a dead Constitution until some blood is spilt over it.
That's actually that's a fair point, I would say. If any part of it is alive, it would be that, and the First Amendment to some degree, because let's face it, nobody even cares what the other ones are. Let's be honest.
Well, I'm a fan of the right to vote, but I couldn't tell you what number amendment it is.
Because I mean, right, but like the 10th Amendment, the one that says, if we don't talk about it, it's up to the states. No one cares. Let's see here. Amendment 9. Enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Nobody cares about that. They're actually right now, the current administration is actively looking for rights to trample. Excessive bail, yada yada yada. That's random. Stuff about common law. Pleading the fifth. Everybody kind of takes the assumption that if you're pleading the fifth, you're probably guilty.
Yeah, people tend to assume that.
Even though, oddly enough, interesting point of fact, back in the olden days, back in Mother England, it was by law you had to construe that silence was consent. That if you were silent about a particular law or something like that, then you consented to it.
Oh, interesting.
Implicitly. However, that was dutifully ignored by King Henry VIII when he decided to go ahead and behead St. Thomas More, when he refused to even so much as publicly comment on him declaring himself the Church of England and marrying the head of the Church in England and marrying Anne Boleyn.
Yes. Yes.
It's like, yeah, silence means consent, except for you, because everybody knows what you think, pal.
I will say, I think that we certainly have enough living in the Constitution yet, enough of the edifice left over that if we were strong enough and brave enough, we could turn the country back around. Like we have all the tools that we need. I just don't necessarily have the optimism that we are going to do it.
I will say this, even though I am extremely negative, like if it is alive at all, it's extremely weak heartbeat.
Okay.
And it could officially just be gone at like any second. That doesn't mean that abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
Mm-hmm.
Because as long as there is even the appearance of a constitutional process going on, we should be using that, and we should be fighting to resuscitate it. We should be, we should be knocking the progressives aside and running in with the defibrillator, yelling "clear."
Yes.
But I don't have a lot of hope that we'll be successful, because there seem to be elements that are bound and determined to put the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Like, and I do mean bound and determined. Like, we are going to do this. We are going to end it. There will be nothing left, and all there will be is us, eternally pressing our boot onto the face of humanity. If you get that quote.
Yes.
But by golly, I do think it is our duty, it is our obligation to make them work for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is actually a good segue to our other topic.
I agree. We were thinking we would talk a little bit about the California recall election, and kind of along the same lines. Is California just a completely lost cause, or do we think there's some hope for them yet?
Well, let's see here. I think if everything was actually just left to the people in California, and they were actually given the whole story, if they were given accurate information, and if there weren't shenanigans played, I think there could be some hope there. However, the system has currently run, and the people who are running it is pretty much making that impossible. I think, as we've just seen, because now it is 2 days after the recall, and it has been called for Newsom-Leaney with just landslide margins.
Yeah.
Which, given that California is a deep blue state, shouldn't, in a way, isn't terribly surprising.
Correct.
But my goodness, are you people insane? Some of your major cities literally create apps so you can avoid the highest concentrations of human fecal matter on the sidewalk.
Yep.
People are fleeing LA in droves because it's a homeless tent city.
Yeah.
They're not fleeing it because it looks like Escape from LA. They're fleeing it because it looks like a refugee camp in Ethiopia.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's happened so fast. I was in San Diego just a couple years ago, and it was still gorgeous, gorgeous place to be. Flew into LAX, didn't see any of the things that are being talked about now. So it really did slide fast into what it is now.
Apparently, it was crazy. I'll be honest. At first, when I started hearing conservatives kind of rail on it, I was like, okay, I kind of know how this game gets played sometimes, where it's like you'll focus on like the one concentrated area where it's happening.
Right.
But I talked to someone who was leaving there, and she was like, yeah, it's terrible, like everywhere. It's just everywhere. Everywhere there's tents and just homeless people wandering around, and it's dirty, it's nasty. There's, poop. It's like, what is, I don't know how this happens. I don't know why you allow it to happen. And then somebody, I forget was it Scott Peterson, I think his name was, a dude who started leading people in different cities to do cleanup efforts. People got mad at him.
Oh my
Not
word.
not the people there, not the people actually living there.
Right.
The leadership, the politicians, they got mad at him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's two different things that I think about with regard to the California situation. One is that a state that deep blue doesn't turn on a dime. I
Yep.
think the fact that the recall happened at all is just shocking and hopeful. Just that it happened. And it allowed Larry Elder to emerge as a leader of the Republican Party in that state.
Except, dude, 69 years old.
I
He ain't
mean,
gonna be a leader much longer. I'm sorry.
that's a fair point. I think there's a chance that California has time to regret in the next couple years before the next general election not electing Elder, and he has even more time to convince people.
I believe actually their gubernatorial elections are actually up next year.
Yeah, there we go.
So what we'll see, whether there's hope or not, we will see very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because already they are enacting revenge lockdowns, not lockdowns per se, but revenge vaccine mandates and mask the restrictions and this, that, and the other thing. They're already doing that in LA County.
Mm-hmm.
And there's talk of doing it statewide.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to see is whether if there is a spark, more than a spark of sanity left in California,
right,
they will not reelect Newsom next year, because they will be, oh my gosh, that's right. These are all the reasons that he was getting recalled in the first place.
Exactly.
But the fact that they didn't remember all of that, or they got swayed by stupid articles like Larry Elder is a black face of white supremacy. Like, what the? Are you kidding me? How does that even make?
It doesn't.
Never mind. I won't. Don't ask questions that don't have answers.
I don't think there's anything more racist than thinking you could revoke someone's black card for not agreeing with you, but that's a whole nother thing.
Well, then clearly you ain't Joe Biden.
Clearly.
So the fact that they couldn't see that, the fact that there wasn't enough memory to be like, oh yeah, just like a few months ago, we were still locked down to still actively locked down to some degree, because they were one of the last states to sort of come out of it.
Right.
They tried to stop. They were arresting people for surfing. What
craziness!
And they filled in a skate park with dirt. Only to have dirt bikers take it over, which is just amazing. It's like, you're my kind of people.
Yeah.
You got all of that. The fact that they don't remember that.
Yeah.
And take that, like, clearly a lot of them weren't even thinking of it. They were like, Newsom said we're going to get money because we got extra tax money somehow or another. And, this and the other thing. And he said Larry Elder's just like Trump. Oh my gosh, we can't vote Newsom out, because then we'll get somebody who's just like Trump, who will mostly leave us the hell alone. We can't have that.
It's that whole lesser of two evils idea. I have some faith that people didn't.
The devil,
Exactly. They didn't. I don't think they kept Newsom because they thought Newsom was good, or that they didn't see the poop in the street. Right. I think that they genuinely just could not get past whatever the brainwashing is that kept them from being able to consider Larry.
Which is one of the reasons why I'm definitely leaning towards lost cause, unless everybody who can see reality concentrates himself in a particular area. Orange County or just Northern California in general, what have you, unless they all move and essentially create a state within a state.
Okay.
Where they can just, collectively ignore whatever edicts Newsom puts out.
Yeah.
There isn't any real hope for any part of California. Yeah. If they do that, there's no real hope for California as an actual functioning state the way we would think of it. But there would be a part of it that functions normally.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of thing that if it was allowed to continue unabated would eventually lead to a split, and you'd have northern and southern California.
Which honestly,
Eventually.
it's such a big state. I think we got used to having 50 states, but there
Yeah.
are some states that are, when they were founded, the population was so low that it made sense for them to be as big as they are. And now Northern and Southern California are not, for the most part, they operate as different states anyway, just not in any kind of legal way that would be helpful.
Yeah. Now, like right now, honestly, and for one, I don't know how many people who voted for the recall are going to plan on sticking around California.
Yeah,
I'm willing to bet now, given that, since Newsom is already putting his foot on the gas, and I forget the LA mayor's name off the top of my head.
Oh, I don't know.
It's Eric something or another. And since they're already putting their foot on the gas, they're just going to keep going. I now have a mandate to do whatever the hell I want because the people voted for it, and they're going to make it absolute hell for anybody that doesn't just love absolutely everything they're doing. And I swear, if you're in California, I know it's your home. I know that part of you wants to stay and fight. Well, you fought. You lost. You fought the good fight. You lost.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with retreating and regrouping. And that's exactly the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it as you're retreating to somewhere and you're regrouping. Now, whether, again, that's you're regrouping in a particular area in California where you can band together to kind of push back.
Right.
Go for it. Knock yourself out. If that's the way you want to go, I 100% respect that. Or go to an actual red state and kind of bolster the troops there. Also an excellent option. If anything, I think the way that things are going, with Texas's abortion law, I don't think that it's gonna draw in a whole lot more blue people, which is great.
I think you're right.
I think that's great. They'll get the good Californians, and it'll help make Texas a little less purple, and that's a beautiful thing. And this is actually a comment I think I saw made on Timcast that the red states are getting redder, a lot redder, which is not hard to do if you really think about it. The red states actually have a long way to go before they're actually deep red. Whereas the blue states, especially California and New York, they're about as blue as you can get.
Yeah.
In terms of policy. I don't mean in terms of the population once you get out of the cities, but in terms of policy, they can't be that much bluer.
I think conservatives got so used to conserving, they forgot that sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and we just have no offensive game at all.
I think one of the worst things that happened to conservatives was Buckley's phrase, conservatism is standing athwart history as yelling stop. It's like, no,
you can't build something on a negative.
Exactly. All it's been is a long defensive. It's been just a long retreat. Just one step after another. You just keep retreating. So we can't conserve that anymore. So you step back and you try to you draw the line somewhere else, and then you draw the line farther back and farther back and farther back. And it's like, wow, our
wait a second,
our little box is getting kind of small here. Whose fault is that? Oh, it might be ours.
It might be ours, and honestly, it really is. And there's a certain justice to some of this, and it's depressing. And I hate that. As a young person, I'm barely old enough to be an adult in this nation, just in time for it to be completely falling apart. But
I honestly, I feel bad for. I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but
I'm
as
26.
you say, okay, well, it's still pretty darn young, and or like my kids. My oldest is 17.
Okay.
She's months away from being a legal adult and looking forward to, starting an adult life and everything. And I feel bad for everyone like that. Everyone who's just, maybe buying their first home on their own, or getting ready to move out of their parents' house for the first time. It's like, you ain't doing this in the country that I grew up in anymore.
Yeah.
It has changed so much in the last 10, 15 years. And the last year and a half have just been, floor it. But there's a cliff ahead. I know this is going to be so much fun.
It's going to be so much fun. Yeah.
We're going to film in Louise this sucker. All right.
Yeah.
We're going. And I honestly think that's exactly what's going on. I think like, hey, Cliff, yes, please.
Yes.
So we don't have a parachute. I know.
I do think people are getting braver. I think people are waking up and getting braver and talking about things we never talked about before.
Yep, I agree.
I was raised that you don't talk about politics around the dinner table.
Yep.
And now everyone talks about politics all the time, and I think that's a good thing. Instead of just looking away from it and letting the people in power do whatever they want.
Yeah. One of the dumbest things that the boomers and frankly my generation did was get this whole never talk about politics and religion and polite company thing going.
Right.
Our bad. Sorry. Because that is legitimately how that's a big part of how we got here.
Yeah. We don't know how to talk about these things because we haven't.
Yep.
In some ways,
That's
I think
exactly
the current drama is like high school, like the first time you've had to deal with certain things. And maybe we'll grow into some of these conversations, or maybe it'll just spin off the rails. I don't know.
It's hard to say, but every now and then there is a little glimmer of hope, like the Nicki Minaj thing.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, it's like all of a sudden she's talking questions about, about the vaccines and everything, and she starts getting slapped around by Joy Reid and Twitter, and she's like, "Wait a minute, this is bullcrap. What are you guys crazy? Don't." Oh, holy crap, I suddenly see what's happening. Can't you people see what's happening? And she's retweeting Tucker Carlson. I'm like,
what is happening?
Well, this is an interesting little trip down the Twilight Zone.
I don't think anybody saw that coming.
Nope. But then again, this reminds me a little bit of Cardi B a couple of years ago.
Okay.
The first time I ever actually heard of her was she did this little video that went viral that was basically complaining about where the heck does all my tax money go? And
good question, Cardi.
And everybody's like, well, welcome to the intellectual dark web, Cardi B. And but put it this way, she didn't exactly continue down that path of thinking.
That's true.
At all. I do believe she wound up endorsing Bernie. So
did she? Okay.
Square that circle.
Although sometimes I look at her talking to Candace and having her tiffs with Candace, and I think she's thinking about things she's probably never thought about before. She might come around yet.
Anything is actually possible. It's possible that our society doesn't collapse, that we don't completely descend in chaos, that constitutional order is actually restored. These things are possible. And part of the reason I do have a slight bit of hope that can happen is, as you said, a lot of people are getting bolder. Not just on the progressives. They've been bold for a long time. But, well, like I said, we're kind of looking around and realizing that our box is getting kind of small. We're getting cornered. And that means we're running out of options. We have to go on offense now. In order to conserve anything, we have to go on offense. And more people are realizing that. And I was actually thinking about this as it applies to myself earlier today. It's like, without getting into details, there have been personal things in my life over the last few years that have transformed me from someone who, frankly, did not like confrontation at all. I would actively avoid it. I was a very much a path of least resistance person.
Right.
And that's still very much in me. But these couple of personal things have prepared me a little bit. They've changed me in ways that are very good for our current times.
Yeah.
Made me a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more willing to go for the confrontation and just be like, no, we're not doing this anymore. I'm done with it. And if you don't want to be, if you want to not be done with it, okay, I guess it's on then.
It's funny that you would say that, because I would say my progression over the last couple of years has been the exact opposite. A couple years ago, I would say I would have been confrontational to a fault, and not remotely winsome. And I think that even though my fight has not dimmed, I like to think I can present my views. I mean, I have mutuals on Twitter who are absolute leftists, who are happy to talk and happy to have conversations. There's not many of them, but I'm really proud of them, and I'm really happy to be able to have that opportunity. And I want to keep learning how to have those types of conversations.
Yeah, and I do think those. I think those are still important. I think it's important to pay attention to how much time gets spent on them, and whether or not it's like, okay, eventually this conversation is clearly not going anywhere, so I might as well just be done with it. But at the same time, every now and then you open a crack, and that's kind of why you do it. And a lot of times you don't wind up seeing the results until many years later.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times a conversion, whether it's religious, political, whatever, usually does not happen in a conversation. It usually is, for most people, it's a process of years. Almost nobody has a St. Paul moment where they literally get knocked off their high horse.
Right. Exactly.
That just, it almost never happens that way. But over years, you do work. Enough things work on people. That's where you get somebody like Nicki Minaj. It's not that the censorship, the censorship suddenly opened her eyes. It's like, no, she's seen this. It's been cumulative. This was just sort of the trigger that made all of those other pieces sort of line up a little bit. So where she actually, now she can see the trend line. Whether she does anything with that, well, we'll see that in the weeks and months to come.
Yeah.
Well, I pray she does, but who knows? The kind of like the Roman Empire wasn't made Christian overnight. It took a couple hundred years. Yes. These things do take time typically, and so those conversations are still important. It is important that we don't just run off into our own little bubbles. Whether you think the Constitution is dead, on life support, whatever, it's important to remind people that it's still there and that it does have many great parts to it that we should absolutely be adhering to. And again, if you don't want to adhere to a certain part of it, there's a way to change it. Yeah, they put it in there on purpose so you could. Honestly, that's one of my big things with leftists who, they hate the Second Amendment. They want to change it. I'm like, there's a process. There's a process to do that. There are ways you can legally change it, not pass laws that ignore it. You can legally change it. There. You can legally actually completely wipe away the Second Amendment, and it technically doesn't contradict the Constitution because you went through the constitutional process to change the Constitution. Now, I don't recommend you do that. I think it's a horrible idea. But if you want to change it, fine, try. Yeah. Let's have that conversation then. All of this passing laws and everything to minimize it, to regulate it, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, no. And for anyone who says, well, are you saying like people should be able to have machine guns? Actually, yes, I am.
Yeah.
Because one, people used to be able to.
Yeah.
Not that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
Back during the old Bonnie and Clyde days, you could walk into any old gun shop and literally buy a flipping machine gun.
Hmm.
Now, you can argue whether or not that's a good idea. Fine. But the fact is, there's nothing in there that prevents it.
It's oh, that was too complex of a thought. Didn't quite come out my mouth, but um, there's room in a lot of areas of the Constitution for conversation, and I think that a lot of people, except the loudest, farthest left, are still arguing from the Constitution. They're saying, okay, well, machine guns didn't even exist back then, so why would that be the original intent? There are still arguments being made from the Constitution, even on some of our most
right. Unfortunately, they're not the ones controlling the conversation.
That's true.
They're not the ones wielding the power right now.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's arguable how long they have or haven't been the ones wielding power, but clearly right now they're not.
Yeah.
Anything more than that is arguable. And if there is anything in the Constitution still left living and breathing, you're right. It is because the Second Amendment is a thing, and many an American has in fact exercised said rights, and the powers that be do fear the further exercise of those rights. But at the same time, I don't know how much they really fear it, because I have my theory has been since last spring that somebody somewhere is trying to push our buttons. It's like everything. It seems like everything since then has been trying to provoke a violent, armed response from the right. And to the extent that the FBI even basically funded a fake plot against my governor.
Right.
It's like I had my suspicions about that for a while, because like that fell out of the news cycle quick.
Yes.
Really quick.
I barely heard it.
Yeah. At first I was like, is it just because they found out that the apparent ringleader like kind of hated Trump? is that the only reason? Maybe. I don't know. That's like, oh yeah, the guy who was actually kind of pushing them and arranged all the training and all of this and everything, he was a Fed informant. Sweet.
Like all of that kind of begs the question. The Constitution was written to protect us from our government.
Yeah.
So if the threat to our liberty is coming from A, another nation's government, such as China, or B, corporations that are so large that they're effectively ruling, does it even matter if the Constitution is alive or dead? Because it doesn't apply to those things anyway.
Well, honestly, that's part of my argument, is that given given the various attacks, the various threats from institutions that many would argue the Constitution does not apply to, it kind of doesn't matter.
Right.
Which again kind of brings me to my original point. The real question is, does anyone care about it?
Right.
And the answer to that is, in terms of the ruling elite, the answer to that is a clear no. They don't care about it at all. We're still allowed a few of our rights because they're not quite ready to just flat out take them away yet, but they're pretty obviously working on it. I mean, they're, like I said, over in California, after Newsom won the recall, they got right into talking about vax passports for the whole state.
Yeah.
And if they do it, and if New York City's doing it, coming soon to a blue state near you.
Which is exactly why I'm moving to West Virginia.
Which is exactly why my house literally just listed today.
Congratulations.
So, I'm I'm hoping to be. But there's complications because of work.
Right.
But basically, I will be out of Michigan. I will definitely be out of Michigan by this time next year.
Amazing.
Definitely, the family will probably be out of Michigan significantly sooner than that.
Yeah. I'm gonna be in a red state by the end of the month.
Amen.
Something
Hallelujah.
crazy happens. Yeah. Woo.
Nope. It's a good thing. I do look at that as kind of retreating to a place of strength, and well, we'll just kind of see what happens from there. But I realize when you're talking about the recall election, we didn't even talk about the shenanigans.
I know. I don't even. Can you have a democracy if a significant portion of the population doesn't trust the election results?
No, you can't have a democracy if you're purposely setting up your
Exactly.
your mail-in ballots, which you can print at home.
I know.
And you put it in the envelope, and you can see whether or not you voted yes on the recall from the outside of the envelope.
So stupid.
When you've got criminals getting caught driving around with a bunch of mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
When you've got people finding out that they voted already.
Yeah.
And they didn't know they voted. And I don't know if you saw this little clip that was going around the Twitters, but apparently some California news station.
Yes, I saw that.
Oh, you did see that? Yeah, they're playing it, and all of a sudden, like 400,000 votes in favor of the recall just disappeared.
Oh my god!
Just gone like that, and it was caught on TV. It's like, really, 400,000 votes just gone. Really?
I personally don't think that we should have to prove that shenanigans happened, in the sense that if a significant portion, even 20% of the population of a state or a country does not have confidence in the election, then the democracy breaks down. So even if there is even if there are no shenanigans, you have to restore that confidence by any means necessary. And the fact that the left isn't interested in restoring that confidence by passing various measures, then that's less hopeful to me than
something as simple as a voter ID.
Yeah, exactly.
Which in my state you need.
Yeah.
You need ID to vote in my state. Guess what? Plenty of people managed to vote in Michigan. And much to much to my chagrin, it still often goes blue. So
Yep.
Which is just dumb. But
I wasn't even carded this year. I was pretty upset. I had it out, and they didn't even want to see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's annoying.
Yep.
But yeah, so every time I've gone, they've needed to see my ID. So, and that's fine. That's good. You should have to prove that you're an actual citizen of this country in order to vote.
How dare you? So racist.
Preferably even a citizen of your voting district. I know, wild, right?
That's radical. This is too radical.
Just to make sure that you're not voting multiple times in different districts.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy what. Sorry, my computer's kind of throwing a fit, but
that happens. Technology is awesome.
Amazing. But well, this has been not as debatey as I think George hoped it would be when he set this up, but I mean, we agree on pretty much everything, so I'm not shocked that it wasn't particularly debatey.
Yeah. Well, I hope people are entertained and they've actually learned a thing or two.
Yes. I hope people have found some reasons to hope from listening to this, and I hope people have found some reasons to fight and to stand up and not continue to sit back and just conserve, however you think that's going to happen.
Make them work for it.
Yes.
There is more than enough reason to doubt our election process at this point. But by golly, make them nullify your vote.
Right.
make them do it.
Yes.
Maybe eventually they'll get caught, maybe they won't, but at least, you know, you did something to make their job just a tiny, tiny bit harder.
Mm-hmm. It is not that hard to get out and vote. If it doesn't end up counting, you still did everything you could do. So.
And in the meantime, if you can, honestly, go to a red state, because
Yes.
or concentrate yourselves in your blue state.
Mm-hmm.
Whichever option is most amenable to you,
Mm-hmm.
do so, because who knows what the next few years are what the next few years are going to bring.
Mm-hmm. And run for smaller offices, run for school boards,
Yes.
run for city councils. Things are a lot closer within reach than anyone really thinks.
Once my relocation happens,
Mm-hmm.
I do plan on getting involved in the local political scene a bit.
That would be fun to see.
It would be. I'm not saying I'm going to actually. Well, I'd run for, like, school boards or some sort of local office.
Yeah.
I have no interest in getting involved at the state level, because I've seen a little bit of how the sausage gets made, and I don't want anything to do with it.
Oof. Yeah. Well, it has been fantastic, and I think this is a good place to wrap. So, thanks to Ginger for talking with me tonight. And this has been Chatting with Abby, a Daily American Press podcast. See y'all later.
See y'all later.
All right. Good night.
And I just hit end.